The 1920s was a decade riddled with political scandals. Most of these scandals originated from the Harding administration from 1920 to 1923. Warren G. Harding and his vice president Calvin Coolidge won the election of 1920 in a landslide victory. Harding's cabinet mainly consisted of his friends and political allies. They were known as the Ohio Gang. In 1921, the infamous Teapot Dome scandal began when the Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall, a member of the so-called Ohio Gang, was able to gain control over valuable oil fields in Teapot Dome, Wyoming, and Elk Hill, California. These oil fields had been set aside by the government for use by the Navy. In 1922, Secretary Fall made a secret deal with two rich oilmen. He gave them a lease to pump oil out of the fields and sell it for themselves. Fall received $325,000 and a large herd of cattle. After over 6 years of testimony and implicating others in the Harding administration, Secretary Fall received a $100,000 fine and was sentenced to a year in jail. There were also many other scandals that happened within the Ohio Gang. Jesse Smith, assistant to the Attorney General, was exposed as a bagman. He was carrying bribes to and from the Attorney General's office. He was banished from Washington, and he later committed suicide. Yet another scandal within the Harding administration involved Charles Kramer, a legal advisor to the Veterans Bureau, who was exposed for taking bribes, and he too committed suicide. Charles Forbes, head of the same bureau, was convicted for taking $250 million in bribes. Colonel Thomas W. Miller, head of the Office of Alien Property, was also convicted for taking bribes and for fraud. The Harding administration was one of the most corrupt in American history. Only Harding, Coolidge, and a few members of the cabinet remained in the clear. In 1923, Harding declared, "I have no trouble with my enemies, but my damned friends, they're the ones that keep me up at night." President Harding died in office on August 2nd, 1923, from a stroke. Calvin Coolidge, who took over the presidency after William Harding, addressed the political scandals, and his administration was not tainted from the scandals of Harding's presidency. The remainder of the 1920s were relatively scandal-free.